It's complex, it's complicated, and it will flush your hard-earned money out of your pockets if you are complacent. Cybercrimes are everywhere. They're invasive, and if the crooks can't get you through technology, they'll get you by exploiting your other biggest defense: trust. Just as a fisherman uses his net for fishing, cybercriminals use the internet laced with baits for fishing. Those mails you receive wishing you Merry Christmas, or those too good to believe discounts you get over messages. Well, they might not be as obvious, but they are potent and extremely dangerous. In recent years, infamous cases like the 2016 DNC email breach and the 2020 SolarWinds attack demonstrated the havoc phishing can wreak. These incidents compromised sensitive data, disrupted systems, and jeopardized national security. So phishing can not just bring down your personal bank balance, but it can also bring governments and enterprises to their knees. Remember, skepticism is your shield. Don't fall for those generic greetings, urgent demands for personal information, and suspicious links or attachments. In this episode of Mirror Now Against Cyberscam, we'll discuss the cunning tactics used for phishing and the tricks to spot it.
Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on Mirror Now, our effort to make you aware of every cybercrime that is taking place around us. With COVID-19 coming in, the rise of digital usage has been seen, and with that, cyber fraudsters have got more opportunities to scam people like you and I. And on this show, we today talk about phishing, something that is very, very prevalent, but something that we all need to take care of when we are using our cyber platforms. Let me quickly get in our guests on the show today. I'm joined by Shri Parthasarthi, partner and national leader for cyber risk and managed services. I'm also joined by Virag Gupta. He's an advocate and a cyber security expert. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to both of you. And thank you so much for talking with us on Mirror Now. First of all, Mr. Parthasarthi, let me start with you. We're talking about phishing, which is so very common when we're using digital platforms. We get a link, we click on it, and there you go. The scam is already conducted upon us. We have been a victim of cybercrime. Help us understand what are the types of phishing attacks or cybercrimes that we see around us?
Thank you so much. I think the question is very relevant in this particular digital era, and as we are continuing to gallop towards that, I think most people have heard of phishing, but I think there are other significant variants that have come in. Just like any other virus that is there right now, there are things that continue to morph. There is phishing, there is smishing, there is quishing. Smishing is essentially any form of attack which comes from SMS. Quishing is something which comes from a QR code. And phishing is something essentially which comes to you from an email perspective. And this essentially doesn't affect only individual users, it also affects significant corporates, because essentially when you really start targeting users and they are looking at certain keywords, or they look at familiarity, and the phishing attackers essentially prey on them from that aspect. For example, you mentioned COVID. During COVID, I think when people were struggling with health issues and other things, there were a significant number of phishing attacks where people essentially were sent emails to say, hey, you can call for an ambulance here, or you can look for oxygen cylinders. So what happens is the phishing attackers are also very, very context sensitive. They are doing a lot of social media trolling. They know your buying and other preferences. So what will happen is when they send you a phishing or a smishing and other things, they will be very, very context specific to you. So what happens is you get fooled thinking that this is a real email or a real SMS or a real QR code that is coming to you from a provider. And what happens is, inadvertently, when you click on that, what happens is you are now giving access to your particular personal computer or your particular device or to your corporate network to these particular attackers. And once they get into your particular network, there's significant other things that they can actually do from a threat landscape perspective.
Mr. Gupta, therefore, since there are so many ways through which we can be attacked on our cyber platforms and our personal information can be extracted, what is the first and foremost thing that we should look out for when it comes to websites or links which help us differentiate between which is a genuine link and which is a fake link, a link that can lead us becoming a victim of cybercrime?
No, there are three things. First, it's very difficult even for the experts or the educated persons to do the proper security mechanism. Secondly, if somebody is victim of these crimes, then it's difficult to get any justice or in the present legal system. That is clear from the NCRB data which has been just released. So as per that, those data in 2022, there were some 65,000 crimes were reported in the police, which is 25% more than the 2021 data. In Delhi alone, there are only some 686 cyber crimes are reported in a year. So looking from these data, it is clear that all the cyber crimes, even 1% are not reported. Because what we see from the different reports, that how more than 50% corporate organizations on the government websites are suffering from the cyber attacks. So it is clear that these things are not reported. That is one point. Secondly, from the legal perspective, if we see, so there are two laws are there. One is IPC and one is Information Technology Act. In IPC, if we see, so there are stringent provisions are there. Section 419, 420, then 465, 468, 471. So these provisions are there, and where the punishment can be up to 7 years. And in IT Act, if we say, then it's section 43 and other provisions are there. But the problem is, it's difficult to catch those persons who are doing all type of things, and we have yet to notify the rules as per data protection law.
Yeah, okay. Let me talk about the laws and the legal procedure that one has to follow a bit later. But first, let me understand from you, Mr. Parthasarathy. Like I said, the difference between genuine and fake links, that's what phishing is all about. We have to be careful. And, perhaps, my generation and the younger generation still understand that and are still able to sort of make out that this is something that we should not be clicking upon. But my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, they open their WhatsApp, they get an SMS, they check their email, they get a link, they quickly click on that and they go to that link, which could be a link which has been designed specifically to attack them on their cyber platforms. What is the, what are probably the top 3 things that we should be looking out for when we receive such links and messages?
I think on the generational gap, I would like to comment. I think there have been recent studies which essentially show that 30 to 40% of these kind of cyber crimes are perpetrated through phishing, smishing, and other channels. And when you really look at it, I think that when you look at the generation gap, I think they did find that even the youngsters are prone to this, and there's a significant population. And the reason for that is, as everybody says, the human being is the weakest link, and what happens is the youngsters essentially are trigger happy in terms of essentially going and clicking on certain things. So one element is, while the older people and others who have not been who are not digital netizens, they need to be trained and helped in that particular area. Whereas at the same time, when you look at the youngsters, they also need to be trained to basically look at these things. In a corporate world or in a general world, I think what really happens is, one of the things that is done is there's a phishing simulation exercise that is basically done, right? And where they try and train people, they like to embed these kind of trainings into the person's DNA, because time and again what happens is these kind of phishing attacks basically. Second, what they do is once they do the phishing simulation, they look at who are the people who have basically clicked, and they go and train this. The same kind of training and same kind of education and awareness we would need to do to all of our common citizens, because I think that is important to basically, as we continue to flow and push everything through digital, I think it's very important for us to protect them, not only from a security perspective but also a privacy perspective. And I think the campaigns that we do, and also I would call it where people who are experienced should actually go and speak in these particular communities. People should speak in schools, people should speak in old age communities, where they can actually educate them, show them examples, and show them exactly how these particular things get perpetrated and what is the risk of them actually clicking on that.
Mr. Parthasarathi, let me also then ask you, do we have some sort of evidence of where these phishing attacks originate from? I know it's difficult. The internet space is a vast area. It's extremely difficult to actually trace the source. But for example, in India, we had the Jamtara region, which is infamous for the kind of calls that we get, and scamsters use it to attack people. But do we have any data, anything on such phishing attacks taking place from a certain area or from a certain segment perhaps?
What can be done is, when there is an incident, one thing that can definitely be done is essentially we call this in the cyber world as a takedown service, where we go after that particular ISP or after that particular specific perpetrator to take them down from an overall, and then look at it from a legal perspective. But other than that, I think there are a lot of things when you really look at it. The internet is so amorphous, and also there's so much of IP spoofing that basically happens. So what happens is the perpetrators essentially may be sitting in anywhere across the world and can actually demonstrate as if they are sitting somewhere in India and making the attack. So from that aspect, what happens is that becomes a big challenge, because when you do start tracing, and there is something called deep tracing that we actually do in this particular area, which is where we start drilling down, trying to find out many details, but a lot of times what happens is you hit a blind spot, and which is where I think alternate channels, where you look at the dark web and where you look at all of these particular aspects, which are, there's so much of chatter from these particular attackers. You have to continue to monitor all of that, bring all of that from an intelligence perspective. And I think if I were to look at it from a common citizen perspective, I think it is not just the government alone, it is public-private partnership that needs to come together to actually build out that particular intelligence. And also the bigger challenge is, when a citizen or somebody gets attacked, usually they don't know what they need to do. Second is, they don't basically advertise it because they are very sort of shy about it, or they feel that it is very traumatic for them when they lose their savings. The question is, how do we advertise some of these things and essentially tell people that these are the kind of attacks that are happening,
and also the fact that perhaps they're embarrassed, because every time I've talked to a victim of a cyber attack, they've always said that, I didn't feel like it'll ever happen to me because I was so aware. But that's where we stand. We think that we are aware, we think that we have all the wherewithal to not be a victim of cyber attacks, but eventually some of us do, and we need to take that forward. We need to put that in the public eye so that all of us can learn through it. Mr. Rag Gupta, like Mr. Parthasarathi said, that one of the first things that a victim should do that perhaps is not known, the procedure. What is the first thing that one should do if one becomes a victim of phishing or quishing or smishing, whatever cyber attack? What's the first thing legally that one should be doing?
It's most simple question, but most difficult to answer this question. There are three mechanisms are there. One is internal mechanism, where one can report to the related website or the grievance officer from whose website it is there. Suppose it is from the Facebook, WhatsApp, or whatsoever there. And secondly, they can report it to some cyber toll-free number. And third is report to the police. But basic problem I have already demonstrated that in the NCRB data only 65,000 cyber crimes are reported in a year whole country. Now, what Mr. Parthasarathi was telling about the corporate world, education, awareness and all these things. Now, there are two other areas which are very vulnerable. Common persons, many of them are not using even the genuine antivirus. Now, second is the government. Government as a sector, we have seen attacks, cyber attacks in the AIMS and other areas. And most of these government organizations are not properly cyberly protected in the cyber aspects. For that, there were certain rules are there which were pronounced in the Delhi High Court Order 2014. One was the National Email Policy, that how the government officers should use the NIC network or those email where the servers are in India. And second was for the computer network. So, government computer network where it is not connected to the social media or other things, so that it is properly protected. But these two policies are not properly complied in the government organizations. And now the second aspect is that people, most of the persons are getting messages or email in the name of income tax department, electricity department or other government departments. Now these government departments must, or the banks, now they are not notifying that what is their official email ID with the customers, and anybody is getting call from unknown numbers or unknown email IDs. So I think we are in a huge manner developed these digital, these economy habits and other things, but still we are not, we don't know how to behave, how to protect ourselves in a legal manner. We don't have any legal system, we don't have the grievance redressal system, and we don't have mechanism also where a aggrieved person can report and get the justice. Since people are not getting any relief from the system, so they don't report. Many times they are shy, but most of the time they know that if they report, then the only complainant will be harassed and they will not get any justice.
Which is what the case was when I talked to a few victims, and they said, you know, we filed the complaint and all that, we did our bit, but after that, that whole procedure where the police have to trace the origin of the crime and their money, they never got back the money, and you know, the origin wasn't traced. It is difficult, yes, but they said that it is such a harrowing experience for us because we've already lost our money, and then we have to go you know, forward and backward with the police, instead of just the police being sensitive enough and being aware enough of these cyber crimes in the digital space that they can trace and get back our money. That's probably, yes, Mr. Gupta, please go ahead.
No, the problem is if there is a financial loss, then your complaint may be lodged and police may take some action and there may be some relief. But suppose there is no financial loss and only privacy is invaded or some cyber security aspects are there. So there is a potential loss, there is risk. So only on the basis of risk, it's difficult to lodge the complaint and get any justice. So they will, whatever they will say, please show your system, what was done, what is the so and so thing. So I don't think that they are aware that how to proceed in such cyber crimes except in metropolitan cities where the big cyber these police stations are there.
You know, not even in metropolitan cities. These cases that I'm talking about have happened in metropolitan cities, in the national capital, and the police haven't been able to trace the origin or the money. But Mr. Parthasarathi, you know, are we then ready in this vast, ever-involving world of cyberspace? Are we then ready as a system, as an infrastructure to deal with the kind of cyber attacks that we are seeing pertaining to phishing? You know, now we of course have that challenge of deep fake coming in, and phishing, quishing, smishing, all of these can contribute to this large challenge that we are facing of deep fake as well, with our personal information right there.
I think one of the first things is, if you look at some of the more developed economies, what they have is most of the financial institutions and other things which are usually where the attacks happen, or essentially it's all about money, right, in terms of getting out money. Most of them provide what you call as a support system, and they provide an insurance for any fraud that basically happens, and they underwrite that. I think that is one thing that we need to try and get into our financial system, because our financial systems and our banks and large institutions are making a lot of money. So I think they need to provide that particular trust to the consumer that they will protect them even in these particular kind of things, and this should be an acceptable loss that they basically take, but it should not be acceptable loss to the consumer. Second element is, I think anybody who essentially gets any of these suspicious mails, if they detect it, first and foremost is, rather than essentially clicking on that, they should go to the official website or the official number and basically do that. Third is, I think one of the stigmas that all of us have, right, even I do, is essentially the stigma of going into a police station, right? And I think the cybercrime police stations are not very well staffed. They are also understaffed. And when you talk to the person, he is actually pushing you back to see whether he should actually file it because it's additional paperwork for him. I think we need to build something called a cyber command or something like a 911, which is existing globally, where essentially all of these particular crimes can come, and they should be operating 24/7. And to what Mr. Other panelists said about contacting the institution, I do know that there are particular people who try to contact the institution, but it was on a long weekend. And during a long weekend, none of these people even pick up the phone. So how do you get that particular coordinated? So I think all of these, when you start stitching it together, I think if we start thinking about it from a citizen perspective and be empathetic to them, I think we can put a good structure and a strong structure which will support them in this particular case. And if we do that, more and more people will come forward and provide the information. With that information, we can thwart it. The last part of it, I think there has to be proactive monitoring and proactive filtering of a lot of this particular information, because the government has control, the ISPs have control. They need to actually sit down on that and be able to monitor and control that. Yes, there will be questions of privacy and other information that come in, but I think security is tantamount, and the protection of the assets and protection, giving the citizens a free mind when they are using digital technologies is going to be very, very important.
All right, we'll leave it there. Mr. Parthasarathi and Mr. Virag Gupta, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on this broadcast on Mirror Now and helping us understand phishing a little better and how we can deal with cyber crimes a little better. Thank you very much. With that, we wrap this special broadcast, and I hope in this episode you got as much information and awareness as much as our panelists gave, and you got a little something, a little lesson of how to deal with cyber attacks. Thank you very much for joining us on this special broadcast. Bye-bye.